Overwatch 2 developer blog, Matchmaker and Competitive Deep Dive Part 1. So apparently this is going to be a Part 2 article on this one. Hello, heroes. In the first part of our 2-part deep dive on matchmaking and competitive, this is going to be... we'll look at how matchmaking works under the hood and answer some outstanding questions around how MMR is determined and factored into the system. This is going to be interesting to read because they don't really talk about it too much. Ultimately, the goal of the matchmaker is to create as fair matches as possible across all game modes. We know matchmaking can be a source of frustration, especially in competitive, and we'd like to recognize it doesn't always feel like it's meeting its goal. In order to address your thoughts, we need to dissect the matchmaker and competitive systems separately before going into how they affect one another. In Part 1, we talk about how the matchmaker works, some of the challenges we faced, and some of the ways we've started to tackle those issues. Internal matchmaking MMR. Our matchmaker is designed to create balanced matches. To do that, we need some approximation of each player's skill. Everyone has an internal matchmaking rate in MMR that's a numerical value to describe your skill relative to everyone else. However, MMR isn't an absolute value, meaning your MMR can change even if your personal skill stays the same. This could indicate the general population is getting better or worse compared to you. You can see right in this example below that displays player MMR in quick play with most of us right around the middle of the curve. Looks like one of the bridges I made in Polybridge. So the quick play MMR is up here. A lot of players are here, and there's less players at 6.0 and minus 6.0. Is this what I'm understanding? Why are they talking about quick play MMR? Because believe it or not, like with quick play, a lot of players do play quick play. So like sometimes you'll get games in quick play where somebody will be like, wait, how are you in this game, etc. So I think what they're showing here is like that a lot of players are kind of around here and they try to match make people within that. I think that's what that means. Your MMR will rise over time if you improve your skill and win more games against players of your current MMR level. All our game modes, including competitive, only look at MMR when forming a match. We never use your outward facing skill tier or division to form matches. Likewise, the rank you see in a player's profile isn't the same as their MMR. Which we've talked about this before, where like you have like a hidden MMR, which basically, even though it shows what your rank is, it's not actually what the hidden MMR is. This was something I talked about a bit in Overwatch 1 where they placed you at 3,900. But like you weren't going to be 3,900, like you were still like 4,500 according to the system. This is exactly what they're referencing here. Basically, you have two MMRs, one that you're seeing and then the hidden MMR. And I've talked about that for a long time in Overwatch. Like that's why like some games you would get into a game in Overwatch 1, for example, where it would be like 4,200 versus 4K. That'd be the equivalent of like you load into a game and it says GM3 versus GM1, but it was probably the SR was probably even. It's just somebody hadn't quite gotten to the rank that the MMR was at yet. I think that's what they're saying. We only adjust your MMR after you win or lose a game, or if you could come back after not playing for a long time. Your MMR is unaffected when we lower your rank at the beginning of a season, and everyone in your matches has a similar MMR as you. Initial rank matches can feel turbulent because many players return at the beginning of a season, and anything that changes player population is going to affect the matchmaker. I want to talk about that for a second here. And this is just a take I have on this. I still feel like there isn't enough information and you aren't able to see what your next rank is. I think 7 games is too much, and honestly, I wouldn't mind if they did something like other games where they have like a almost like not an experience bar, but a bar that shows you how close you are to the next rank. I feel like that would be a lot better than just like wait until you win 7 games and then here's your rank and you still may not have ranked. At least when you have like an XP bar going up, you can be like, okay, let me look at that right now. I see where I'm at, I see where I'm ranking at, and so they're trying not to have it so at the end of every game, like you see your SR adjust, but like I still feel like there should be like an XP bar or like a bar that maybe shows your, like as you're climbing, because it feels like you have to wait 7 games. And let's say that you have a day where you go 50-50, right? If you go 7-7, for example, because, you know, obviously a lot of the time 50-50 does happen, you have to wait 14 games to see if you're going to rank up or not. And a lot of the time, if you go 7-7, you'll probably, especially when you kind of like middle of the season, you'll probably stay around the same rank, but you'll be like, well, I just won 7 games. So it's something that I'm starting to notice a little bit where like, I feel like there needs to be either one, you need to be able to see your rank update a lot quicker, or 2, they need to just show like almost like a level up bar. So you can at least know, okay, I am that close to my next rank and I'm going to be there. I think it's just a lot more, there's more feedback to like, I just feel like it's a lot better to see that. I think the more and more I've seen rank now, having something that would show you that progress to when your next rank is, may be a little bit better than just wait till you win 7 games, and that win in 7 games could take multiple days to get to be able to even remotely see what your next rank is. You don't know what that progression is until you hit that, right? And you could go like 2 and 4 each time that you play, and then you're like 4 days later, you finally win your 7th game. You went like 7 and 12, and you're like, wait, I didn't rank up. I won 7 games. It doesn't have a really good. It just feels like you're not able to get your information as quickly as you can for that. So that's just my take on that, and I feel like they should have a little bit more to that. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's why I like, if it ends up being like something different than that with less wins, then that may not rank somebody up based off of their system, which is why I think maybe like an XP bar or something would be better than that. I say XP bar like WoW, but you know what I mean. It's also important to remember that our teammates are human. We don't always perform the same from game to game or even team fight to team fight. This inherent variance in our individual performance means that the matchmaker needs the results of as many games as possible to get an accurate representation of your skill. I mean, this part can make sense because obviously some days you may not play as well as you did the day before, or like you might only play a certain hero and you get the, terrible maps over and over again, or not even a certain hero. Like I might play Junkertown 5 times in one day, and all 5 of those games you go up against a Sojourn. The SR could be the same, but the Sojourn will dominate that map because Sojourn is really good on that map, right? So different things can happen. So, skill variation within groups. We love to see you group up and have fun together because we believe Overwatch 2 is a game best shared with friends. Grouping up does, however, influence the matchmaker in a few different ways. I also want to point out that currently, right now, we cannot group up in GM outside of duo queue. We can only duo queue, and we can't 5-stack. In GM right now, you're not allowed to do that. You can only duo queue. So once you get the GM, that's it. There's no 5-stacking, 4-stacking, 3-stacking. It's only duo queue. Every other rank, you can 5-stack. When players group together, there's the possibility that the group has a larger skill difference than a match we typically like to make. Those of you at the very highest levels might notice these skill differences more too because there's far few players at the very top of the MMR curve. We can't always avoid these type of matches, but we can make them feel better. These matches can often feel imbalanced if they create situations where there's a large disparity of skill within a single role between the two teams. For example, we might match a highly rated tank against a comparably lowered rated tank. So even if the overall match is balanced, the competition between tanks feels very one-sided. All right? Which we see that happen a lot. And I feel that sometimes when that happens, if it takes like a rank 10 tank and puts them up against a GM 5 tank, more than likely that the one tank will definitely be able to understand more of the map control, creating space, etc. And then that's where you start to see that difference. But apparently we've got changes coming to the game over the next few months, which will dramatically reduce these disparities. We'll try to find pairs of we'll try to find pairs of similar rated players in each role when making a match. For support and damage roles, which have 2 slots, each player will be paired with 1 player on the opposite team. There will still sometimes be matches with a large range of differently skilled players, but in these cases, the 2 teams will be more like mirror images of each other. So I like that change. That basically means that instead of going, okay, we're going to get an even game, but like the tank might have a much higher rating, the support might have a much higher rating, they're going to find like an even match almost. Now, what that does the queue times, I don't really know. But overall, I kind of like that change. I feel like it will make the matches a little bit more even. Doesn't mean that every match is going to be perfect, obviously, but I do like that change. And it feels like the games, in theory, this is in theory, should be better because you're going up against equal skill rating rather than being like, oh hey, I'm a support. I just got to gold 5. I just got the gold 5, and then you're going up against a gold 1 support, and there's a little bit of a difference there at that point. Now you're going to be matched more frequently with players of the same, like, SR and range, and that will definitely be a little bit better for the game, I think at least. However, even with these improvements, there will always be times when we make matches that have a skill disparity that isn't reflected in MMRs because some players in the match aren't calibrated. We've seen this much more frequently since Overwatch 2 launched, and we welcomed a large influx of new players. That makes sense. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of new players, so, like, you can't take into account, a brand new account when you go into matchmaking, but overall, it should hopefully feel better if they do that. Setting up new players for success. Overwatch 2 is a lot to learn. It's a fast, team-based hero shooter where players juggle the gameplay of a traditional FPS, the unique abilities of a diverse hero roster, and many different types of game modes and maps. We've tackled the learning curve from multiple directions to help ease new players into Overwatch 2. The most visible change was adding the first-time user experience at launch, but there's also an invisible change we've been working on in the background. The first-time user experience makes sense in the sense that, like, it allows players to understand what other heroes, how they play, how to play them, etc. I do like that. I like that. So we noticed that new players were losing their initial matches much more than they should have. And this trend wasn't leveling out enough by the time they played many more matches. The win rates of new players should be normally distributed, meaning most should be hovering around a 50-50 win rate. But instead, the distribution was skewed with new players losing at higher rates. So basically, like, initially it was supposed to be like a 50-50 win rate, but new players were just losing a lot more. This challenge is more difficult since the matchmaker has no initial data on our player's skill when they enter the first match. We've tried to remedy this issue with two distinct changes. First, new players initially started at an MMR value slightly below average. You can think of it in terms of skill tiers around the lower divisions of silver. This was already below the center point of the player base's MMR distribution, but the new player win rate was still too low. We've since lowered the start MMR to a rating equivalent to bronze 5 and instantly saw huge improvements for new players with a sub 40% win rate. So basically what happened is if you were a new player, it was putting you in silver essentially, and they weren't winning, but then they put, when they changed it to bronze, players started to win, which I feel like starting in bronze 5 probably would have been the play to begin with, right? Like, because at that point, players are going to be newer to the game and still are trying to learn, like, what does this hero do against that hero? We know, wait, you can eat grav? Like, there's a lot of new things that will take time to understand. So starting at bronze 5 might make a little bit more sense than putting them in silver, because if you put them into silver, at that point, you know, players have played quite a bit or learned a little bit about how the game plays, and you're going to go in there and be like, wait, what's going on here? Which then ends up putting you back into bronze, or you have really long streaks of not winning as many games, right? Which then, especially with the current rank system, when you have to win 7 games and you're on a 40% win rate, that's not going to be that ideal, because a lot of time you're either going to D-rank or you're not even going to rank up at that point. So I think starting at bronze 5 makes sense, because at that point you can climb up rather than just get D-ranked down. Initially, that is. So as you can see right here, it says new players, and it shows like the 50 to 60% win rate and then the 30-40% win rate and how the MMR changes. It's, you know, it makes sense as to why they made that change, but I feel like that's probably a good change. If you're playing with or against a new player in Overwatch 2, these games should now broadly be fairer. The second change we implemented was aimed at new players who did not belong at the initial MMR. Initial matches are weighed differently than standard matches because they increase and decrease MMR at a much higher rate than usual. We want to adjust a player's initial MMR as quickly as possible, because until their MMR is more properly calibrated, we're not able to make fair matches. So it goes back to what, you know, that they're new players a lot of the time. So at that point, they want to be able to get them to their MMR much quicker, because if not, they're going to go through this period of just like not necessarily being in the actual rank, and they're just going to keep losing games, and it's just not going to be a fun experience because you're just losing way more than you should be winning, or at least being at a rank where you can start to climb and get better. However, this still meant that it took several games for players to get where they belong. To improve this, we added a streak modifier system that tracks a moving average of a player's win rate. When a player wins more than 50% of their matches, we start to increase their MMR faster. This levels out once we see the player's MMR value has them join in fair matches, which corresponds to a 50% win rate. With this change, we've seen that new and returning players reach a 50% win rate with much fewer matches than before, which is good. I mean, I think, like, making changes to that system is going to be good for players who are just starting in the game, too. Because I feel like, obviously, if you first start to play Overwatch and you're just getting into really frustrating games, that wouldn't be as fun as what they're trying to do now, where they try to put you into the correct MMR a lot quicker. So the faster we can calibrate a new player's MMR, the fewer unfair matches we'll create, not just for that player, but for the other 9 players in the match, which is good, because obviously when you get into a match, you want it to be a much more even game. Like, that's matchmaking. You want it to be an even game, or a game that feels more competitive than just like, oh, hi, buddy. Overall, we think this was a huge improvement to the new player experience, which in turn should result in better matches for everyone. There will be more information on updates in the future, but until then, please keep sharing your feedback. It's our most valuable development resource. Final thoughts. We're continuing to analyze data, tune values, and evaluate more changes to the matchmaker. Our highest hope is to make a match that feels fun for everyone, even the team that loses. Well, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I like close matches, but I still think even then, I think if a team loses, even a close match, they're not gonna be like, well, that was a, you know, but I get where they're going with here. The closer a match feels, the better the match will be overall for both teams, regardless. If you go into a game and someone's going 40-2, right? And your team has 2 elims with like 10 deaths at that point, that's not gonna feel fun for the other team. If the game is both teams have 40 elims and one of the team wins at the end, it's gonna feel a little bit probably better than the game where you just get absolutely stomped. Straight up. We feel strongly the best way to achieve this is to make matches that are as fair and balanced as possible, which, yeah. Yeah. I like close matches. I've had matches where they're extremely close, and I'm like, you know what? We didn't win that game, but that was a ton of fun. Like, that was super close. In comparison to the Sojourn game where you log in, when you play, and there's a Sojourn who's 50-3, and everybody's getting one shot, and it was just like, you know what I mean? Like, what can you even do at that point? So, it sounds like they're trying to make steps to make, one, the new user experience better, and two, make the matchmaker take into account more than just like, oh, we found 2 SRs that are close together as a whole team. Now they're trying to be more particular with it, like tank is matched with a tank, DPS is matched with a DPS, and it's a lot closer of a game. So hopefully that works, and obviously we'll see more and more as they get better with that. But I mean, I can't say that those are bad changes. I still think they should probably add a few more things to the game that is a little bit better for like being able to see how close you are to ranking up.